Okay, the homework for you was the paper that looks like this. It was a single sheet. It has an event, it has a data table, and on the back side, same thing. It's got an event, but it's asking for a sample space. The one I'm going to show you is one that already has an event that's occurred. It's got the data for you. And we have the following cards. We have A, B, B, and C. And the data table tells me how often that combination occurs. The first question is this theoretical or experimental? Well, if I have data, I know that it's experimental. If it doesn't have data and it wants the sample space, then that's going to be theoretical. It asks, what's the probability of drawing a B card, not replacing it, and then drawing an A card? So you're looking for the combination of BA. So I look at my data table, and I see that BA happens 5 times. Now, 5 is not my probability because it needs to be out of my total. I would add these up, and I got a total of 20. So 5 out of 20, which obviously can simplify to 1/4, which is the same as 25%. On your homework, it asks you for the same type of thing, looking at the data, and then it asks for the complement. We learned what the complement was, and that means that the two ratios or the two probabilities add up to 1. And for this one, if it's not an even number, it's going to be an odd number. That would be the complement. And then whatever you figure out here, it would be the complement there. So for example, if this one asked for the complement, I would say, well, the complement of 1/4 would be 3/4, because 3/4 plus 1/4 gives me 100% or 1. So this would be my complement here. Now if I'm looking at the next part, it has a table of data. I look and see what looks familiar. Let's see. I noticed that my relationship here is that something happens 1/4 of the time. So I'm looking at the number of trials, and the favorable outcome is still the same. It's still B and then A. And so I'm going to go ahead and put 0, 0 here, and that'll help me figure out if it's proportional or not. From here to there, it's going to be dividing by 4, because it's 1/4 of 8, and 1/4 of 8 is 2. Instead of moving to the direction that I have here, this is moving backwards. So that means I'm changing my sign to be multiplying by 4. 4 times 4 is going to give me 16. Same thing here. Multiplying by 4 is 28. And going back to that side is going to be dividing by 4. So you're using your ratio up here of the probability to figure out what you're going to be filling in on your data table. Then it says, based on the table, what's the constant of proportionality? Remember that COP are using the inside numbers. So we can use 8/2 because it's y over x, but then, oh, excuse me, it needs to be y. So I need to change that. That should be 2 because that's my y value, and 8 is my x value. When I simplify it, that's 1/4, which again is going to be the same as what I came up with over here. I'm going to show you what my graph looks like, the one that I had previously done. 0, 0, 8, 2, 16, 4, 28, and 7. And you're doing the same thing on your homework. You're filling in your table with the values according to what you got here for your probability of rolling an even number, which I feel like is 1/2. And then you're deciding, how do I need to count on your x and y axis, and then plotting your points. It says create an equation that represents the relationship. Well, this is easy because y is y. The k I already figured out, and that's 1/4. And the x just stays as x. And you're doing exactly the same thing. This says which data had a higher probability. Well, in order to compare, I need to go ahead and say, okay, well, my experimental probability was 1/4, which was 25%. But if I'm looking at theoretical, I go back to my cards. In theory, the chances of pulling a B and then an A, B is going to be 2 out of 5. A is going to be, are we replacing? Yeah, we're not replacing it. So it's going to be out of 4, and I've taken a B card, and there's 2 out of 4 there. I can simplify, that's going to give me a half, and then I can multiply. I'm going to simplify there as well. It's going to give me 1/5. So now I can compare my 1/5, which is 20%. Compare that to 25%. Obviously, experimental is greater. On yours, it's going to ask for you to make a prediction of 120 trials. I would use this data that you got, y equals something times x, and just plug in. The number of trials is going to be your x value. So you could plug in 120 here. You're multiplying by whatever you got as your constant of proportionality, and that'll give you the number of times that you would get your favorable outcome.